Brian Babin, who's also co-chair of the Border Security Caucus. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Great to be with you, Emma.
Good morning. All right, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on President Biden's decision to raise this refugee cap. Why do you think he decided to do this, especially now with the surge of migrants coming across the southern border?
Well, the big reason is, of course, what we've said all along, that he caves in to his radical wing. President Trump had that cap on these refugees because, and also had in that executive order of President Trump's had limited it to nations that we could vet easily. He has opened that back up. President Biden has now opened that back up. Here we are in the middle of a pandemic. High unemployment rates, and we can't vet these people. The very reason President Trump made that executive order, and I had a bill called the Refugee Resettlement Act of 2015, and then again I reintroduced it, the Resettlement Act of 2017, was to keep hotbeds of terrorists, those types of nations, from sending people over here, and they would be exploiting our refugee program, which is basically run by the UN, and use our refugee resettlement program as a Trojan horse to get terrorists in here. So the whole thing is just another example of how President Biden caves in to the squad, caves into his radical wing, and instead of thinking about the safety and security of America and Americans, they want to send out an open invitation to the world, again, just like we're seeing at our own southern border, so that people will flood in, and we can't vet them. And we saw this happening during Obama's time and early into the Trump administration. We've had terrorists come in and do some dastardly deeds. We know they can exploit our refugee program. That's exactly what's happening. And again, he's not thinking of Americans. He's thinking of his radical wing in the Democratic Party.
Well, I want to focus in on something you'd said. You'd proposed this legislation to deal with the issue at hand of specifically who could be crossing into the borders and what ties they might have to some dangerous organizations. But let's talk about some of Logan's reporting that we heard. Again, this potential possibility that Senator Schumer and Democrats could go at their own immigration legislation alone without really seeking any Republican input here, using budget reconciliation, also including it with that proposed infrastructure bill. Congressman, what's your thought on that? This decision, again, to really do it alone. Can they do that? Okay. I think, unfortunately, having a little audio issue. But, Sean, what's interesting is, again, this idea that we have seen Democrats in Congress and in the Senate as well going through with their own sort of legislation. Of course, you've got President Biden's approval, and with reconciliation, they hadn't needed to get one single Republican vote. And yet, of course, this is the president that had been promising unity all along.
Unity all along. And again, one of those, the biggest challenge right now is what you've seen with immigration. And again, raising that cap to 62,000, allowing those refugees in at that time. You've got Republican lawmakers pushing against that in various states. And this is when you're seeing the crisis of immigration as a partisan fight, and really it should not be, which is what, you were alluding to talking to the congressman about.
And Congressman Babin, if you can hear us here, again, we were talking about this lack of bipartisan approach to when it comes to these huge issues across our country. Why do you think that is the case? Have you spoken out to Democrats, and have they attempted to reach out to Republicans?
Well, I am the House Border Security Caucus co-chairman. I took a group of 13 of my Texas colleagues several weeks ago to the Rio Grande Valley. And we stopped and visited with one of my Democrat counterparts, Henry Cuellar, in his district, went to Laredo, among a number of other stops. And I can tell you that there are Democrats that are very, very apprehensive about what's going on the border. And I can tell you that President Biden's radical positions and policies on the border, that he's reversed all these really working policies of President Trump, President Trump had controlled that border better than any other president that I can ever remember, Democrat or Republican. And people down on the border are very concerned about floods of thousands and thousands. We've had 173,000 people flood across last month, or month before last now. And there's still probably an equal number of those people came or even more last month.
Yeah.
And they're very concerned. These Democrats are very concerned. And that's why I think a number of counties voted for President Trump that are in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas for the first time. They don't want to see this out of control chaos. They see the crime. They see the COVID that's coming in. The Biden administration is releasing COVID patients, COVID positive illegal immigrants coming in and being released. They have dispensed with the interior enforcement. They are back to catch and release. And then you top this off with their radical policies on refugees. This should make every American very, very nervous about what's going on, whether it's for their job or for their own health and safety.
And what you're describing is quite concerning here and could fall into the category easily of a crisis at the situation. But that's not how the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, sees it. Here's what he described what's happening at the southern border.
Are the policies of the Biden administration to blame?
No. What we're seeing is indeed a surge of people to the border. We've seen that in the past, but we inherited a totally broken system.
Do you know what's being done to fix it? And do you know what he means by calling it a broken system?
I know what he means. It's just cover for the Democratic Party policies of open borders. I can tell you, I know of many of the professionals that worked in the Trump administration. And they know exactly what's happened. They warned the Biden administration during the transition between administrations not to reverse these Trump policies, or they were going to have a crisis on the border. They wouldn't listen. They opened the border up. They reversed many of the good policies, the Remain in Mexico policy, the Title 42 public health restrictions, the National Emergency Declaration. Building the border wall, everything was stopped in its tracks by President Biden in the first days of his administration, and now they're trying to hide it. And when they say the numbers are down and they've got it under control, the numbers of unaccompanied children, what they're doing instead of having numbers down, they're facilitating the admission of all of these thousands of children, and I say children, most of them are teenagers, coming into this country and just facilitating their release. That's basically what they're doing. It's like telling your kid to clean up his room, and instead of cleaning it up, they take everything and put it in the closet, out of sight. This is what they call controlled borders. They did not inherit an immigration policy in shambles. They inherited the lowest crossers of illegals, probably of any modern president in history. And now they're back to overwhelming numbers, and it's just open borders. And listen, the reason for this is a grand strategy of just replacing American voters with illegal immigrants and then giving them the vote so the Democrats can stay in a permanent majority position. That's what it's all about. Everything from refugees to open borders to the H.R. 1 take over our election process by the Democrats.
Well,
that's what it is.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, Congressman, but I am glad we were able to connect and for you to shine light on what you believe is a major issue in our country right now. That's Texas Congressman Brian Babin, live on Newsmax. Congressman, thanks so much.
Thank you, Emma. Great to be with you.